Welcome back to another explainer. Look, today we're tackling something absolutely crucial. We're stepping right into the left seat of the Bombardier Q400 to master one of the most intense, high-stakes emergency protocols in all of aviation: WindShear standard operating procedures. When the weather outside turns violently unpredictable, having these exact steps burned into your brain isn't just about passing your next check ride. It's quite literally about survival. I'm going to walk you through the exact sequence of actions, the mandatory callouts, and the instrument scans you absolutely need to know. So let's get focused and get right to work.
Okay, let's dive into how this all unfolds. Here's our flight plan for today. First, weather radar setup. Second, detecting wind shear indications. Third, case 1, takeoff roll. Fourth, case 2, after takeoff. And finally, clearing the wind shear. Starting off with section 1, weather radar setup. Because hey, before we even think about releasing the brakes, configuring your instruments correctly is step 1 for survival. If you don't set the radar right, you're basically flying blind into a catastrophic storm. To instantly memorize these radar setup steps without missing a single detail, let's use a little mental trick I call the 1-2-20-40-4 rule. Here's how it breaks down. Step 1, set both MFD 1 and 2 to the weather page. Step 2, adjust your scale to between 20 and 40 nautical miles. Step 3, switch the weather radar on. And finally, the really crucial step 4, hit that standby button exactly 4 times after lineup. Just lock that into your brain right now. 1 and 2, 20 to 40, hit it 4 times. This trick ensures your radar is perfectly primed before you even push the power levers.
Moving right along to section 2, detecting wind shear indications. So our radar is set, and now we need to know what warning signs to look for below 1,000 feet above ground level.
Wind shear is sneaky, but your instruments, they're going to tell you the real story. Airspeed fluctuations are usually your very first clue. The crucial thing here is knowing exactly what counts as an uncontrolled change from your steady-state flight. Enter our next memory trick, the 15-500-5-1 rule. You are officially in a wind shear encounter if you see fluctuations exceeding plus or minus 15 knots of indicated airspeed, or plus 500 feet per minute in vertical speed, or plus or minus 5 degrees in your pitch attitude, or plus or minus 1 dot of displacement from the glide slope. And finally, you've got to watch for any unusual movement of the power lever just to maintain your flight profile. 15, 500, 5, and 1. Spot any of those, and you are officially in the danger zone. Section 3, Case 1, Takeoff Roll. Let's simulate our first potential encounter directly on the runway, where we're committed to the takeoff. Picture this, you're barreling down the runway, and suddenly the environment just turns totally hostile. In this scenario, your eyes have to be absolutely glued to the airspeed indicator. During a wind shear event on the takeoff roll, that indicator is going to do one of 2 incredibly terrifying things. It's either going to increase way too rapidly or it won't increase at all, regardless of your power settings. The literal second you see that airspeed anomaly, you execute the golden rule callout. Either the pilot flying or the pilot monitoring shouts, and I mean shouts, wind shear, abort takeoff. There's absolutely no hesitation here. The pilot flying immediately aborts the takeoff, bringing that aircraft to a safe stop while the pilot monitoring instantly gets on the radio to tell ATC. Safety on the ground is always priority number 1. All right, Section 4, Case 2, after takeoff. What happens if we're already off the pavement and in the air? As you climb into those stormy, turbulent skies, the aircraft is fighting massive downdraft and completely chaotic air currents. As you scan the instruments, the pilot monitoring is going to start noticing highly erratic airspeed and altimeter readings. I'm talking increasing, decreasing, then just maintaining in a totally unpredictable, wild pattern. Now, in this dynamic environment, the most extreme danger you face is an airspeed that continuously decreases. If your speed is bleeding off uncontrollably, you are losing lift. And guys, gravity is winning. And that brings us to an absolute non-negotiable emergency protocol. If that airspeed continuously decreases to a dangerous level, the pilot flying must push the power lever all the way forward to the firewall. Maximum possible thrust. You do literally whatever it takes physically to keep that aircraft flying. At the exact same time, the pilot flying makes a mandatory, authoritative call-out. Think of this like a famous movie quote. You need it locked into your memory so perfectly that you just shout it reflexively. Wind shear, no change in configuration. This establishes a strict, unbreakable rule. You do not touch the flaps, and you do not touch the landing gear. Changing the physical setup of the aircraft right now adds drag or alters your lift characteristics, which could be instantly fatal. Okay,
So while we are maintaining configuration, you still have to manage your pitch. The standard procedure from the pilot flying is to maintain a pitch of 10 degrees. But here is the massive curveball the pilot monitoring has to watch out for. If the airspeed crosses 160 knots, the pilot monitoring must forcefully call out, speed 160, pitch 15. Why? Well, because the Q400 has a flap 10 speed restriction of 167 knots. If you overspeed those flaps, you're risking severe structural damage. So, on that call-out, the pilot flying pulls back and maintains a pitch of 15 degrees to bleed off and manage that speed. Finally, Section 5, clearing the wind shear. We've survived the absolute worst of the turbulence, and now we have to recognize positive aircraft performance so we can safely execute the escape and recovery. Let's walk through this beautiful little piece of crew resource management step by step. First, the crew notices the airspeed and altimeter are finally increasing linearly. No more of that erratic jumping around. Seeing this positive trend, the pilot monitoring calls out, clear of wind shear. The pilot flying acknowledges that and smoothly brings the pitch back down to the standard 10 degrees. Next, the pilot monitoring confirms a climbing trajectory and calls positive rate, which prompts the pilot flying to respond, gear up. Once they reach acceleration altitude, which, remember, is 800 feet and above, the crew transitions right back to normal standard operating procedures. Finally, the pilot monitoring calls ATC to request leveling out at flight level 100. Just a perfectly choreographed dance. Now, during this recovery, communication with air traffic control is vital. They need to understand exactly what just happened to your flight path. The pilot monitoring has to relay the specifics, and it sounds exactly like this. SG-123 experienced wind shear on takeoff path from 1500 to 6000, unable to level out at 7000, climbing passing 7000. It's precise, it's professional, and it's highly informative. Aviation is a zero-compromise environment where there is absolutely no room for second-guessing yourself. We've walked through the 122-40-40 radar setup, the 15-500-5-1 indication rule, and the critical voice callouts you need to survive. So, my challenge to you today is this. Review these mental tricks until this standard operating procedure becomes absolute second nature. Because if a storm hits during your takeoff roll, will you be ready? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep studying those flows.